Jian the Magnificent, tyrant of the Acrylian Empire, destroyer of 1,000 worlds and sworn enemy of the Taroth, stood on the deck of his flagship, surveying his armada. No planetary system in a 10,000 light-year radius was unmarked from the brutal war he had waged against the Taroth over the centuries. Many were now ashen husks of once proud and thriving civilizations. The war had decimated the Acrylian Empire, reducing its people to a handful of worlds trying desperately to survive. But Jian knew that the Taroth had been equally reduced, and that after an eternity of being evenly matched, more or less, he finally had the upper hand. Jian's fleet was now entirely manned by automatons, a silent army of virtually indestructible merciless machines. A neural interface gave him complete control, and now that he was satisfied with his preparations, he signaled the armada to jump to the edge of the Taroth command system. This was not the original Taroth homeworld. That had been destroyed more than 300 years beforehand, shortly after the Acrylian homeworld had been shattered. Both civilizations had had to relocate their homeworlds many times. The system that they emerged into was merely the final resting place for the Taroth. Jian signaled the fleet to be ready for immediate combat, expecting that the Taroth would make their final, futile stand. Instead, the fleet's scans revealed empty space. No ships, no mines, nothing. The long-range scans around the Taroth's planet showed that even the orbital defense systems had been disabled. Not on standby, but completely depowered. Jian suspected a trick. The bitter feud between their peoples had fueled a hatred so great it bordered on spiritual, and led both sides to commit unspeakable atrocities. There was no way that the Taroth would give up. Perhaps they would. The Taroth certainly knew that Jian's fleet was significantly more powerful than anything the Taroth could field. Their doom was inevitable. Perhaps they had chosen to submit to their fate with uncharacteristic grace, knowing they could not possibly resist. The prospect troubled Jian. He had paid too much, lost too much. He wanted the Taroth to fight so that he could better savor his victory. He wanted to extinguish the light from the eyes of every last Taroth. He wanted vengeance for his brewmate, who had died at the hands of a Taroth assassin a century again. He wanted vengeance for his spawn, who had died in excruciating pain from a biogenic virus the Taroth had used on his homeworld 2 decades later. He wanted vengeance for the billions of his people and their worlds savagely torn apart by this war. Most of all, he wanted vengeance for the Taroth's arrogance, their obstinacy in the face of Acrylian superiority, their foolish, pointless defiance. Cautiously, the fleet moved into orbit, preparing to bombard the surface. But scans showed no life on the surface and no activity in the hives. Not trusting that there was not still deception at play, Jian injected a swarm of covert surveillance drones to the surface. He watched the telemetry as it came in. The surface showed the scars of previous Acrylian attacks, deep gashes in the landscape where fire from the heavens had carved wide swaths through the cities and countryside. Taroth corpses littered the ground, clearly left where they had fallen. Their carapaces had jagged tears as if something had burst out from within. A preliminary analysis indicated that one of the engineered viruses Jiran had deployed 17 years ago had mutated and circumvented the Taroth's antiviral measures. Jiran requested a more detailed scan and continued his surveillance. The armoured entrances to the underground hive structures were open and unpowered. There was no indication of life anywhere, nor were there any automated defences. Occasionally, the drones found another rotted corpse, but there were no signs of life. Jiran clenched his jaw. It would be the final insult for the Taroth to deny his right to collect on the debt that was owed him. Finally, a drone notified the system it had found something. Deep in the capital, a small number of Taroth were huddled at the center of a vast cavern. The drone made its way towards the group and scanned for weapons. 30 warrior-caste Taroth, not one energy signal amongst them. Their only armaments appeared to be the long blades they strapped to their forearms when they engaged in ritual combat. Jian was disappointed this would not be the victory he deserved. A futile last stand by the pathetic remnants of his enemy was not enough. But wait. The drone focused on the Tarov at the center of the huddle. Jian could not believe his luck. It was Bernard. The hierarch had been the architect of the Tarov's battle strategy, single-handedly responsible for the worst of the Aquilian losses, including those perpetrated against his children. Of all the Tarov to survive, Jiran would make him watch as he tore apart his warriors limb from limb, before slowly crushing their thoraxes. Then, he would personally tear pieces of Bernard's carapace with his claws, before slowly gorging on his entrails, while the hierarch screamed and writhed in agony. Small beads of venom formed on the tips of his fangs at the thought, and he ordered the fleet to prepare squads for landing. The battle cruiser fired a sustained energy beam, creating a broad tunnel that stopped just short of the cavern. There was no need to destroy the planet or to hide their approach. No strategy could save the 30 Tarov from the millions of automatons poised to invade at Jian's command, and Jian was eager to reach the end. Jian strode into the cavern at the head of his mechanical legion. He paused and ordered the automatons to fill the entire circumference of the cavern, ringing the enemy completely. The Tarov watched in silence, seemingly undisturbed by the forces deployed against them. The air was acrid and cold, far chillier than Jian preferred, but his focus was entirely on one being. "The end at last, Bernard," Jian hissed and bared his fangs. "No more tricks, no more escapes, no more hope for you or your people." He shook his shoulders and shivered with delight. "Your reckoning has been a long time coming, and I will make sure that every last moment of your life is an agony that feels like an eternity." Bernard and his warriors stared impassively, unreactive. The cavern echoed with Jian's proclamation, which quickly dwindled away into silence once more. Jian bristled at the lack of response. Did they not understand what was about to happen to them? "I have planned this moment for so long. I am going to shred your kite into pieces while you scream for mercy, and rip your hearts from your thorax so that I can eat them as you die." Again, no reaction. After a moment, Bernard seemed to smirk. Enraged, Jian snarled. "What about this situation could you possibly find funny? I am going to destroy you all, and when I am done, I am going to wipe every trace of you and your species from this world, and every other world you have ever despoiled with your foul presence. You will be erased from the galaxy. No one will ever know you existed." There was a soft cough from somewhere behind Jian, which he ignored. "Time to die, Bernard!" Jian raised his talons and pointed at the Tarov. "Seize them!" he commanded, both mentally and aloud. Nothing happened. Not one of the automatons moved an inch. "Seize them!" Jian screamed, furiously sending orders through the neural interface. Still no response from his mechanized army. One of the Tarov idly scratched in the general area of his reproductive organs. Behind Jian, a louder cough, followed by a soft voice saying, "Mr. Jian?" Jian the Magnificent, tyrant of the Aquilian Empire, absolute despot over millions, formerly billions of lives, turned incredulously to stare at the intruder. A small Terran, barely half his height, was looking up at him expectantly, holding only a slab of thin crystal on which alien icons could be seen. "Mr. Jian?" The Terran spoke again. Jian drew himself up to his full height and loomed oppressively over the small figure. "I am Emperor Jian, known as the Magnificent, absolute monarch of the Aquilian Empire and its subordinates, terror of the—" "Identify verified. Mr. Jian, I represent the Terran Mechanized Workforce Syndicate. We have been trying to reach you about your lease repayments." The Terran interjected, nonplussed by the aggressive stance of the Aquilian. "You leased 6.5 million units of our reconstruction and rehabilitation workforce 13 standards ago." He broadly gestured at the automatons lining the edge of the cavern. "You are now delinquent in your payments. Our last recorded payment received was 9.75 standards past, and your current account is in deficit, approximately 8,445,870,000 credits, including interest owing." The Terran looked up from his crystalline ledger, as if to give Jian a chance to explain himself. The Aquilian screamed with fury and attempted to grab the Terran, but a personal shield prevented him from getting a claw near the man. "Did you do this?" he screamed at the Terran, pointing at the robots. It's company policy to disable access to the workforce until such time as delinquent accounts have been addressed. The Terran paused again. "Are you able to make full restitution on your account?" "What? No one in the galaxy has that kind of money." "You'd be surprised, Mr. Jian. At any rate, there are additional penalties that would also have to be addressed. You appear to have violated a number of clauses of your lease, specifically modifying the hardware of the workforce to disable their transponders, and to enable their use in interspecies aggression." The Terran looked up at the apoplectic monarch. "Now, I am not one to suggest that disabling the transponders was a deliberate attempt to hide from us and prevent us collecting on our debts, but you have proved to be very difficult to find. We have been trying to reach you for several standards. In these circumstances, your contract allows us to include a finder's fee for any information that allows us to serve you notice, which you are liable for. The sum of 1,300,000,000 credits has been added to your account to cover our reclamation costs forwarded to..." The Terran checked his notes. "One Mr. Bernard, Hierarch." Jian's head snapped around. Bernard gave a little smile and then waved. He turned back to the human. "I will rip your head off and..." "Redacted. Your corpse, you filthy..." "Very redacted. Very, very redacted. Children might read this after all." He tried futilely to attack the human once more. "You cannot do this!" "Please, Mr. Jian, there is no need for that kind of language. I am merely a representative of the syndicate. Once your account is no longer in arrears, you will be able to renew your lease. However, as per your contract, we are exercising our right to temporarily remand our workforce for diagnostics and remediation. The lease will be on hold until such time as we can determine why the transponders are non-functional and how the workforce came to be used for acts of aggression. For your information, should it be demonstrated that these units have been modified outside the bounds of the service agreement, as the leaseholder, you will be held liable regardless of your personal involvement, and the penalties applied at the standard rate of 160 million credits per unit. Your account will be suspended until our investigation is complete." The Terran ticked off something on his ledger, and a small receipt materialized in his hand. He held it up. "You have 0.25 of a standard to appeal any or all parts of the Syndicate's decision in this matter, or you may bring your account up to date at any time that is convenient to you." "Wait!" Jian snatched the receipt and glanced at the eye-watering total. "I have thousands of planets. Take them. Take as many as you need. You can have them all, and all of the Terrov too if you just wait 5 minutes." The Terran coughed awkwardly and looked at his ledger again. "Yes, well, unfortunately we have surveyed the systems claimed by the Aquilian Empire and the Terrov Consortium, and their current value does not cover your deficit. Terrans have more than enough metals and minerals for their needs. What we really value is biodiversity. However, the biospheres of almost every planet in both the Empire and the Consortium have been largely destroyed during the course of your conflict. You no longer have anything of material worth to cover your debt." He looked up at the Jian and gave a lukewarm smile. "Still, I am sure a resourceful being such as yourself will find a way." The human looked down at the crystalline ledger, then shifted his gaze to the Tarraf, who was still lounging unconcerned. "Mr. Bernard, Hierarch, as agreed, the sum of 1,300,000,000 credits will be applied to your account. It will cover the costs incurred leasing cloning vats, as well as the first 2 standards of the Reconstruction and Rehabilitation Units lease, to begin at a future date. Delivery will be delayed while we make some security upgrades to the workforce. Please note that despite humanity's sordid history, the Terran Mechanized Workforce Syndicate generally frowns upon the use of its workforce in acts of genocide. Good day." With that, the Terran folded his hands and suddenly dematerialized. The sound of air rushing to fill the void was overwhelming, as all 6.5 million automatons were transported from the cavern, the surrounding area, and from aboard the armada orbiting above. Jian raged against the suddenly empty cavern, screaming invectives and violently frothing in the maw. His curses echoed loudly and impotently as his fury at having his invincible army snatched away from him reached a crescendo. After a moment, 3 things happened in quick succession. Jian's drones notified him that their detailed analysis of the tariff corpses on the planet's surface was complete, and showed that while the virus was real, it was inactive, and the corpses were in fact clones that had likely never reached maturity. Jian's now empty and undefended armada notified him that a large fleet of tariff ships had jumped into the system and were making their way towards the planet. And Jian remembered that he was not entirely alone in this vast empty cavern. He turned around slowly and looked toward the Taroth. As he watched, they slowly drew themselves up, no longer impassive observers, now keenly focused on just one thing. Jian could not help but notice the large and very sharp-looking ritual blades each warrior wielded on their arms, and realized that in his confidence and his rush towards victory, he had neglected to arm himself before entering the cavern. Well, it seems that everyone has debts to pay.